In 3, 2, 1. Bill Atkinson. How are you, man?
Good. How are you doing, Evan?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So are you originally from Butler?
I am. I grew up here.
Okay. So
Yep.
graduated from Butler High School and all that?
Yep.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah. I lived in, 3 different houses before I graduated high school, all within a mile and a half of each other.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. In town, outskirts of town?
No, out at the Conquenessing Meridian area.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Cool area to grow up in, man.
Yeah.
That's
It was
sweet.
neat. It was nice. We always outside playing, riding bikes, whatever.
Yeah, that's cool. Have you been in the restaurant industry even in high school? Were you working at certain restaurants? How did that develop for you?
When we lived in Meridian, which was where I lived up until we graduated, I lived within walking distance of, then it was JD's Pub, now it's W. Rick's Tap Room and Grill.
Yeah.
So whenever I got to be the age that I needed to get a job and I was, saving up to buy a car and stuff like that, it made sense. I could walk there,
Right.
It was like four doors away from my house.
Yeah.
So I walked down and applied for a job and I started washing dishes.
Dude.
Yeah, so I worked there from the time I was 16 until I even worked there after I graduated culinary school. Well, high school. I would go whenever I got home from breaks from culinary school and stuff. I would work there. It's all I really did. Just started out washing dishes. It was fun. I mean, it's not a glamorous job, but you're in a kitchen with a whole bunch of guys who have good senses of humor. We're all kind of misfits, and
Right.
You really got to screw around for a lot of your day.
Right,
as long as you
right.
got your work done, nobody cared.
Right.
So it was a lot of fun to be there, and I just would watch guys working and would pick up on what they were doing. So then I started doing a little more, and pretty soon started cooking and just kept going with that. And I just figured I didn't really want to know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So cooking was fun. I was all right at it. And I figured I could go to school for 2 years, not have to do a whole lot of paperwork and sit behind a desk because I'm not real good at that. I just don't enjoy it.
Sure.
And thought I can support myself wherever I would happen to move if I wanted to, wherever I wanted to go in the world, I could support myself until I finally figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Right. People got to eat.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like you're going to run out of people to feed. So
Right.
I just kept going with that, and I never got out of the industry. I just kept sticking with it.
So your passion for food really started just by getting a job at a restaurant then?
Yeah. I tease my mom all the time because she and my grandma are really, really good bakers.
Okay.
Not so much with the savory side of things. Everything we ate growing up was like well done and not seasoned at all. But like all the sweet stuff we ate was awesome. So I didn't realize that a lot of food had a lot of different tastes until I started working in a restaurant.
Yeah.
And that's whenever I was like, oh, this is different, and just kept going from there. So I tease them because I say it's funny that I ended up doing this because it's really the opposite of what I grew up with.
Sure.
So yeah, tease them a lot about that.
That's funny. What culinary school did you go to?
Penn College of Technology in Williamsport.
Okay. Was that a good experience for you?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It was. I had looked at a few different places. One of them being the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, which is like the Harvard of culinary schools. But so I went there, looked. Their tuition was outrageous.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. At the time when I was going to college, my 2 years there would have cost me about as much as a bachelor's degree from a typical university.
Wow.
So I looked and we were contemplating, do I want to go here? Do I not? And I kept coming back to, I don't know if that's what I want to do forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like a lot of money to spend to not know if I want to do this forever.
Yeah.
So I kept looking, and I came across Penn Tech because they had a program that was almost identical to the Culinary Institute of America's, but it was in state. My tuition was a lot less, but it was the same class schedules, same length of time. It was still a technical college, so if I ever did decide I wanted to go do something else, a lot of my culinary stuff transferred as electives.
Cool.
So that was kind of what made the decision for me. Was it was more cost effective, and I felt like I didn't necessarily just lose it all if I decide to go into a different career.
Mm-hmm. Help me better understand culinary school. Do some people not get in? Is it like a college in that way? So where it's like, hey, you got no skill. We're not even going to try with you. Like,
no, it's more like vote tech.
Okay, gotcha.
For my experience from culinary school is, it depends on where you're applying. I'm sure there are, like if I would have applied to Hyde Park, they were very selective.
Really?
Yes. But Penn Tech, and at the time there were, I don't know, at least three schools in Pittsburgh. You had like International Culinary Academy, Pennsylvania Culinary. You had IUP had their culinary in Punxsutawney. And then I don't know if the Art Institute's program overlapped the other two that were in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, you had a decent amount of options in different price ranges. But most of those programs just focused on culinary. It was like an 18-month program at most. And once you were done, you were done.
Sure.
So, I mean, they were businesses too.
Mm-hmm.
So you would go in. If you didn't get in for one semester because it was full or whatever, then you would just get started a semester later. But yeah, it's not like you're applying to Harvard or Yale or something like that. When I started at Penn Tech, we had our intro classes. There were probably 25 or 30 of us in our first kitchen class. Mm-hmm. And there were, I think, 2 of those classes every day for 5 days. So you basically had 10 classes that started out with 25 kids all starting in the program. So you figure 250 kids. By the time I graduated 2 years later, I only graduated with one other kid that did the program in 2 years. It was very time consuming with your credits and things. So most kids would stretch it out to a 5th semester instead of getting it done in 4. But even still, out of those 250 kids, we had shrunk down to really one class left.
Wow.
Just because it's like college, people go and they want to test something out and they don't know if they like it or not. And they get a couple classes in and they realize this isn't like cooking at home, and it wasn't what we thought. So then they switch majors.
From what I've seen, just from TV shows, or just if I'm at a restaurant and can peek into the back room, it's intense.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's chaotic.
Chaotic's probably a better word for it.
Yeah, it can be intense too. It depends on the personalities in the kitchen for sure. Mm-hmm. It's one thing you learn whenever you do a lot of restaurant work. Said, I thought I was gonna be. I went to school to learn how to cook, right?
Yeah.
And you don't realize all of the personalities that you come across and you learn from, and you identify like, what's the right mix here to have in your restaurant to make this functional and not boring, and then not dysfunctional. It's kind of a unique balance. So
I would imagine like you need leaders in the right position.
Yeah. I used to joke around. I had one of my best friends, he worked with me from the time we opened the chop shop. His name is Zach. And I always told him, like, I was kind of molding him what I needed him to be, because he was very young at the time. He was, I forget how old he was when he started, but he was early 20s. It was like 22, 23, something like that. Not really having a lot of experience in a kitchen other than around Butler. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to get him to work the way that I worked. And I'm typically quiet. I can't walk into a room and make 12 new best friends. You know what I mean? Like, sure. I gravitate to the guy who's like standing in the back, and we just stand there and I'm like, you're uncomfortable? Me too. And, but Zach is the opposite.
Okay.
Zach was that guy who he goes into a room and he's got, everybody's his new best friend, like he's just very outgoing, very social. It's very natural. And so when we got going, I would say, I need you to do this. And I'm like, but I don't want you to be me, because if you're me, this place is going to be real boring real fast because nobody's going to be talking while they're working.
Sure.
Nobody.
Sure.
So he was always the guy that was, while he was working, asking you the ridiculous questions like, so if you had to lose a limb and replace it with one weapon, what would it be? And so then you'd be standing there working like, man, I don't know. This is not something I ever thought of, you know? But you have to have that good mix of personalities that kind of complement each other and balance each other. Otherwise, that's when you walk into a place and it feels stale. You know, there's no energy in it. Like, you know, just it's boring. You know, that's why the shop is kind of loud.
Yeah,
and
I love it.
We have the open kitchen. You know, it's creating noise. There's a lot of things to look at, a lot of things that catch your attention, because that's the kind of environment I like to be in.
Yeah,
but I'm generally not the guy who is the one standing there yelling, "Hey, look at
us, look at what we're doing." You know.
So I need all those other things happening to really catch people's attention.
Did the Culinary Institute prepare you for restaurant ownership?
No.
Okay, so how did that happen? So you graduate.
Yeah. Well,
what's your next step then?
Yeah, like I said, they're businesses. So you learn a lot of cooking theory.
Okay.
You know, you learn all of the science behind what you're doing. You know, but real world application you don't get at school because there's too many kids. You know, my last classes I think we had 12 kids to do what 3 of us would do at the shop. You know, so you got 4 times as many kids to put out what in the real world 3 of you will do.
Wow.
So you don't really develop the application and the speed in school, for sure. Most of your classes are focused on cooking methods and execution. There's not a lot of the business end involved. That's typically something you just pick up along the way. And for me, I had a goal when I got out of school that I wanted to have my own restaurant started by the time I was 30. Mm-hmm. No business background, you know, nothing like that. I just worked my way up from the time I graduated until we got to the shop. And I really wasn't that well prepared because most of the places I had been, I had focused on writing the menu, making the recipes, like teaching people how to cook, all that kind of stuff. I did the ordering and whatever, but I didn't actually have to write the checks, you know, that the accounting department did that.
Sure.
I just ordered my stuff and then
it shows up.
It showed up, and then I made sure that I spent the money that I was supposed to spend, but I never actually had to write the check. And if I went over a little bit, I got a phone call and it was like, hey, you went over by like 2% this month. Like, okay, yeah, I'll make it up next month. So it didn't really prepare you for that, but I feel like business is a lot of common sense, and I might oversimplify things, but I figure I need to take in more than I spend is basically it. So that's what we do. You know, food is hard to make money in any way because you're juggling a lot of things. Everything's perishable. Your labor can get out of hand real fast. It's very utility heavy, you know, so your overhead is a lot. So I just try and make sure we sell more than we spend every month. And, you know, you're probably not going to get rich in the food business, especially just selling food. Like we don't have any type of liquor license or anything. That's where you usually make your money in the food and beverage business. But we make enough to keep the doors open, keep everybody paid. You know, my theory was always focus on the product.
Yeah.
If you focus on the product and you have a good product, good things should happen. So that was the main focus, was always the product. And that would buy me enough time to figure out the numbers. And you know, I've been fortunate. It's worked out so far. Butler's been very supportive from the get-go. And had this been Allegheny County or something like that, I probably wouldn't have survived.
Really?
No.
Over the last 6 months, you mean?
No, I mean...
Or you mean just in general?
From the get-go.
Wow,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, just because the overhead would have been higher, I would have had to have a much steeper learning curve for the business side of things. And I honestly started the shop on a budget that you should never try and start a restaurant on. So that's one of the reasons a lot of restaurants fail. They're underfunded.
Okay.
You should have enough money to get the place up and running and have probably at least a year's worth of expenses I had enough. I had scraped together enough money for the down payment of the business, of the shop. Used everything I had left to try to remodel it. That's why it's the Chop Shop. I don't know. Did you know that?
I didn't. So that's where the name.
I always collected old gas and oil stuff, and have always been interested in old cars.
Sure.
But everything in the shop came from another restaurant that had closed, that was broken. My dad and I would go haul this equipment home, and we would fix it, and we would put it back in there. So there was not a single thing in that building that was brand new.
Oh, dude, that's sweet.
It was all pieced and parted together from other restaurants. Those, you remember the old yellow booths that were in the back in the kitchen area that were real ugly? That was because that was the last thing I needed to get the shop open.
Yeah.
Was seating for that section, and I was out of money. I found those booths in a pizza shop in Carrick that was closing for $100 as long as we went and ripped them out.
Right. You guys hauled them. Hey, I'm not gonna lie. Those are some of my favorite booths, man. I'm not gonna lie.
They served their purpose. They were rough looking.
They had character for sure.
So, like that's how it came to be, because that's what it had to be. We were just surviving is survive long enough to get open. Hope people come in, and once we got people coming in, it was okay. Now we got to start paying attention. Like, how do we keep the doors open? I need to make. I can spend this much money because I brought in this much money. So that's what it was. For years, that was really the only. That was the business model.
Okay.
It wasn't well thought out in advance. It wasn't. It was just survive.
Why Butler? Obviously, you're from Butler. You're invested here. From just a Butlerite's perspective, there aren't a crazy amount of local businesses from local people, but you certainly chose Main Street, downtown Butler for your first restaurant. What was the process like to get there?
It made sense. It was just mostly common sense. I wanted to be in Butler. Growing up, you constantly hear, and it doesn't matter the generation, it doesn't matter where you grow up. There's nothing to do here. It's consistent anywhere you go. But for us, our main street was becoming pretty depressed when I was a little kid. It was already in a major downturn. But there were still some neat things. The parades always drew people. People would be lined up 3 and 4 people deep on the sidewalk to see the parades. Yeah. And then when we were there, you'd always stop at Allen's toy store and walk through and look at all the old toys and stuff that they had in there. And used to eat at the hot dog shop.
Right.
So in my time, even though downtown was already depressed, I watched all of those things leave. So it made downtown a pretty sad place. And again, it goes back to my budget, what I had to spend. Main Street made sense financially because nothing had been opened on Main Street in a long time whenever I started looking for the shop. And then I happened to luck into the building that the shop is in, going up for sale a few months into my search for a place. It had already housed a restaurant, so I didn't have to go through Harrisburg to have the use of the building changed, which is, if anybody's ever done that, it's ridiculous to have to change.
Just red tape.
Yeah, because restaurants have such different building codes.
Okay,
like
that makes
for
sense.
The health codes and things like that, than a retail space does. So if you're trying to go from retail to food service, there's a ton of expenses involved in having it drawn, sent to Harrisburg, redrawn, sent to Harrisburg before you ever even touch a piece of equipment or a can of paint. So it was the right building at the right time. Having already had a restaurant, it had the major components that I needed, even though they didn't necessarily work right. It had a hood system. It had a fire suppression system. It had a walk-in cooler, a walk-in freezer. that was really all I needed. Everything else I could fix. So it just happened to come up for sale. Somebody knew I was looking for a building and also knew that the owners were closing their business and going to be selling. So I got a heads up on it before it got listed. Called my real estate agent and said, hey, I heard this is coming up for sale. I'd like to go look at it. Can you find out when? So she did. She found out the day it was supposed to be listed, already made us an appointment the day that it was listed, went in, looked at it, and I think I made an offer on it the next day, and then it was accepted like 2 or 3 days later.
Wow.
So the building was listed for a day before it really got sold.
Right.
So I lucked into that one, and the process of getting it open was not nearly as bad as I anticipated. Because at that time, like I said, there wasn't much that opened in Butler at the time, and there definitely weren't any new restaurants looking to come in. So again, being naive, I had no idea where you're going to start other than we need to rip out what we don't need and then start fixing it. So get a big dumpster, dropped off behind the shop, and we just gutting the first floor, and we got it all gutted. And then I was like, okay, now I need some building permits, I think. So I went down to the city building and met John Evans and said, here's what I'm doing. And I said, he's like, well, who's going to be your contractor? I said, well, my dad and I. He's like, all right. So do you have a drawing? And I'm like, nope. I said, do I need one? And he's just like, oh.
Yeah, right.
So he was a big help. He kind of directed me where I needed to go and made sure that I wasn't being wasteful, with resources and things. Like I didn't have to like just guess at who should I go talk to get this done, this done. He kind of would give me a list of people that he was familiar with working in the city and say, here's a list of people, try calling them.
Right.
And so that helped a lot.
Yeah.
We had that first floor completely gutted and put back together to what you see at the chop shop pretty much now in about 4 months.
Wow. Yeah.
With just
that's amazing.
My dad and I and some of my friends. None of us were contractors.
Sure.
We just go in, and I would kind of look at the space and be like, this is kind of what we need to have happen here. And then we would find pieces and parts and build it and make it happen.
That's sweet. You were around the time that you opened, it seemed like you were kind of on the forefront of the new life that's been brought into downtown. So it seems like a lot of businesses, whether they were just planning to open, it seemed like they followed you, whether you had, an impact on them or not. Are you in conversations with local business owners to try to help bring new life into Butler? Are you guys kind of working together to try to make this happen?
Somewhat. We were definitely one of, if not the first thing that really kind of opened, that started drawing attention on Main Street in many years.
When I remember when you guys opened, dude, there was a buzz came around pretty quickly.
Yeah, we did everything wrong that you probably could do wrong to really get the place open and promoted. I ran out of money. I didn't have a sign on the front of the building. We didn't have a sign for like 2 years.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, we had a A-frame marker board that I built out of parts in the basement and stuck it on the sidewalk that said open. Like with an arrow. That was it. Like, stuff like that. But we have seen a lot of things come around after. I think Reclamation, opened 2 years after we opened. The boys at Butler Brew Works had bought their building almost a year to the day that we bought ours and started work on trying to get that open. And I'd had conversations with both of those groups of guys about like my experience getting open, and if they needed anything, that come see me. And John and Ben would come over and ask me about kitchen layout sometimes, and what would they do with this or that. And Butler Brew Works, like they got everything handled on their own pretty much, but I still ended up over there. I help them out now, you know.
That's right.
Talked with Spencer a lot at Max Brick Oven Pizza with him getting open and just, you know, where he wanted to go with his menu and stuff. He was so excited, and because he eats at the shop a lot too. He always had. So when he got that spot and he was going to open, he was like, I'm going to put in a brick fired pizza. He's like, I'm working on the menu, but whenever it's done, I'm going to bring it over and you tell me what you think. I'm like, okay. Like, yeah, right. Like he's got a lot of good skill too. Another guy that went to culinary school. He's traveled. Sure. He's eaten a bunch of different countries all over the world. Like he probably has I know he has a more well-traveled, you know, palate than I do, but just because I was there first, you know, he wanted to tell me what he was going to do and wanted to see what I had to say just because I was there first and I survived. So my opinion mattered to him, you know?
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I mean, even from a customer of yours, there's something unique about what you do. I don't know if it seems like you have a vision, not only for the shop, but even for cuisine too. Like the sandwiches, the food that I eat at your place, I've just never experienced anywhere else. But at the end of the day, it's sandwiches, it's wraps, it's burgers. Right. But what is it? How do you come up with what you come up with? Because I think that's what sets you apart.
Yeah, we get creative, and that was the scary thing with trying to open something new in Butler was I want to have a level of creativity, and you want something that reflects like your identity, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I opened the shop and based it on somewhere that I felt like I'd want to hang out for 12 to 16 hours a day. You know, someplace that I didn't get tired of, that wasn't boring, wasn't whatever. But when you look at a lot of other independents in Butler, especially ones that have been successful and lasted for many, many, many years, their menus are fairly similar. You know, you can go on and and I'm guilty of it too. Like everybody has a Reuben, right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as you say Reuben, you know what's on it, right?
Sure.
So a lot of places have, you know, a meatball hoagie, and you know what's on it. It's very safe. It's very familiar. And that's good because that sells. People don't necessarily like to experiment with their food that much. They do more now because there's a lot more exposure to it. But 10 years ago when we were opening the shop, people in Butler were pretty set in what they like to eat. They went to the same restaurants on the same days and ordered the same things and sat in the same seats.
Everyone was a regular somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And so writing that menu, I knew I wanted to be able to be creative, but I also knew I had to root it in things that were familiar in order for people to give it a shot.
Okay.
So the first menu, if I were to pull out the first menu that we opened with and you looked at it side by side with the menu today, they would look very different. There are a handful of things that have always made the cut no matter what we changed on the menu. But there were a lot more familiar things with just like a small twist to it or a little update to it. And once people would come in, we really had to train our service staff to be able to direct people to things on the menu because we named things differently. You know, the kitchen, like I said, it's a place where the sense of it has a kind of an elementary sense of humor to it, you know, where fart jokes are still like real funny.
Sure.
So, you know, that was something that I always liked about the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted that to kind of come through on the menu too. So there were a lot of different puns, things like that on the menus, and that's how I named things. But then we found out real fast that people would come in and they would just skim through the menu with the name and never actually read the description. And they would say, I don't understand your menu. I don't, what is this? And I'm like, looking at it going, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, right. There. Just read it.
And after probably about the first 3 or 4 days of being open and hearing that a couple times a day, I realized it's because people are only looking at the title, the heading. And because none of these names are familiar, they stop there.
Huh.
So then we would go through with the staff and say, okay, if somebody likes buffalo chicken,
Mm-hmm.
direct them to the backfire because it's buffalo chicken.
Right.
It's just not called buffalo chicken on the menu.
Right,
That's
right,
in the
right,
description. So we had to learn to do that and really kind of direct people, even though the food was slightly more creative, just the wording was not familiar enough. But once people got to try it and they started to trust us, then I could start, every time I changed the menu, I could get a little more creative.
Right.
So that's how it kind of came to be what it is today. We always have done like a special every day. So that when we first opened, that was where I focused on being real creative on something. And there would be times we didn't sell one.
Really?
You know, just because it was early and people were trying the regular part of the menu first, and that was where you develop that trust with them.
Yeah.
Because people aren't going to come out to eat if they don't trust you.
Sure.
You know, you can get them sick. They don't want to waste their money on something that they didn't like.
Right.
So you really have to gain people's trust before you can kind of really get a little too far outside the box. Mm-hmm. But, you know, slow and steady for the last 10 years, we've been able to keep that going, and people let us get a little more creative and a little more creative. And now that's actually, you know, we're 9.5 years in,
mm-hmm.
and it doesn't feel like it to me, but my group of cooks that are in the shop now, most of them are in their early 20s. So they were kids.
They were kids
when I opened, and they saw that progression, and they were interested. They became interested in food, like, you know, in high school. They went to Votech or whatever,
mm-hmm.
and now they're at the shop working because that was the place that they tried something different for the first time and they liked it. So it's neat to have that happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's humbling, and then it's also an eye opener because you realize, man, it's been a while. You know?
Right. Because I mean, this has been a chunk of your life at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be March. We've been 10 years.
Wow.
I'll be 40 in April, so
yeah,
that's a quarter of my life at the shop.
Are you guys doing anything for your tenure?
I have no idea.
Okay. Obviously, you're gonna have to wait and see what happens in our country, but like,
yeah, I have no idea because at 5 we started replacing tabletops and stuff.
Okay.
But then we didn't get that completely done until this year. Again, you know, when we opened, all of the tables, all of the chairs, they were all mismatched because it was what I found for either next to nothing or free, and fixed it and stuck it in there. And then when we were coming up on the 5-year anniversary, I found a bunch of bowling lanes that I wanted to turn into tabletops. But it just took forever to get them all cut, all sanded, all sealed, all finished, all trimmed.
Right.
So it took what was supposed to be, hey, 5-year anniversary, we're going to make new tables for the whole shop, turned into, well, we got this row done. and then I'd take on another project.
Yeah.
And my focus would be there for a while, and then be like, okay, well, now we got this row done. So that was the plan for 5 years, was new tables that all matched. But
yeah,
I mean, we could have actually almost stretched it out to be started at 5 and completed at 10. You know?
That's awesome. It seems, I mean, just from talking to you, it seems like a lot of trial and error, and it seems like you have to adapt pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Have you had mentors through this process that have mentored you in owning a restaurant, or just?
Not in owning. Probably the two that I would cite for most everything would have been the guys that I met at the Pines Tavern right out of culinary school. Owner Mike, and then at the time partner and executive chef Jason. That was my first job after I got out of culinary school that was not a typical Butler restaurant, meaning it was creative. Everything there was from scratch. We had our own small garden outside that we grew stuff in, that expanded to a gigantic garden across the street the following year.
Wow.
That they really kind of showed me that I could be creative as long as I focused on doing things well, executing my cooking methods correctly, tasting things, making sure that they were well-rounded. And as long as you focused on that, people would show up, and that would give you time to figure out the rest. Mike was very good at running the business. He was the administrator, and Jason was an excellent chef. So it was nice to be able to kind of pick their brains. I still talk with them.
Cool.
They still come to the shop and eat. They're both retired now, but Jason actually lives fairly close to me, so we still see each other a few times a year, and still talk to Mike whenever he's around.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Those are probably the two that really got me thinking about doing something on my own.
Do you see yourself? You talked about you have some cooks that are in their early 20s. Do you see yourself investing into the next generation in a way, just by even showing them the ropes?
Yeah, for sure. I used to tell Zach this all the time when he started, was if we ever got to a point where we were ready to do something else, or that he was ready to do something on his own and I was in a position where I could help him financially with that, I absolutely would. Mm-hmm. Just because what we were trying to do was different. And if, like, Zach worked with me for 7 years from the day we opened until just 2.5 years ago, that if he were to leave me, he went from being my biggest asset to my biggest competitor, which is okay. Everybody needs competition, and that's healthy. But now there are two guys that have similar backgrounds and similar styles competing for probably not a much bigger percentage of the market, because what we were doing was different. Right. It's not going to necessarily appeal to everybody. It's not Applebee's, it's not.
Sure.
So if there was something he wanted to do and he had helped establish the shop and get it to the point where it was, and I was in that position, I would absolutely help him and partner with him, because he helped me. That's me helping him. Right. But it's also the two of us continuing to move food in Butler in a direction we wanted it to go. Yeah. So, yeah, I would, if I'm in that position, I will still help out somebody that's put in the time and worked with me, and that I know is a solid investment.
Right. So, I mean, speaking of pushing the food in Butler in a certain direction, Butler Penne. Mm-hmm. How did that come up, and how did that happen?
That was us sitting on the back porch. Before I opened the shop, I was surviving doing catering on my own.
Okay.
I had
turned. I know, that's cool.
Yeah, I'd turned my garage at my old house into a commercial kitchen, and I was doing catering jobs out of it. So I got hooked up with Iron Mountain in Boyers with the Office of Personnel Management one time, and they had 3 cafeterias inside the mine for all of the employees that worked there, so they could get lunch if they needed to or wanted to. So I got hooked up with the Office of Personnel Management, and I would go up there one day a week, and I would do lunch in one of their dining rooms. So what I ended up doing, you couldn't have any open flames in the mine. Everything had to be cooked on electric. Couldn't have a chafing dish that wasn't electric, anything. So I was, again, thinking, like, how do I do this differently? And really, it doesn't come across like cafeteria food,
Sure.
So I started doing made-to-order pastas like we do at Butler Penne on little residential electric hot plates. And it was same setup. I would have all the ingredients out, marinara, Alfredo. I would always take a sandwich special that I could cook on a little electric panini press there, a couple soups and a salad. And 2 of us would go up, and I would cook all the pastas and the sandwich, and the other person would handle getting the soups, the salads, and cashing people out. And that's what we did from it was 2009 or 2008 until I opened the shop in 2011.
That was your main source of income at that point,
Every
then?
Friday I would go up and do that. So we got the shop open, and I stopped doing that because I wasn't able to go up to the mine. As we were talking about what was next, and I said, there were two other types of restaurants that I wanted to kind of experiment with. One was I wanted to do traditional Southern style smoked barbecue. I wanted to do a take on like street taco kind of stuff. And so we were talking about it, and I said, why wouldn't we just take the pasta concept and turn it into a fast casual restaurant? Because all the bugs are already worked out. I've done this for 3 years. Like, all I need is a space.
Right.
And so that's how that ended up kind of coming about and getting started, was because on the operation side of things, all the bugs were already worked out. It was just find a space. And then that's when I learned that about changing the use of a space. That held us up for years trying to get all of that together.
Because the current Butler Penne venue was not.
It was an office.
It was
prior
an office.
To,
that's
yeah,
what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an office prior to being Butler Penne. So that held me up for a long time because it was a completely different experience trying to get that started than it was the chop shop. And I was expecting them to be pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was that delayed us. Wow, we lost a year trying to figure out a hood and fire suppression system that ultimately we ended up not needing because we were using induction burners.
Oh, no. The things you learn, though, right?
Right.
Man, if you were to open a restaurant at this point, then would you rather just like build your own place? Like, is it that much of a hassle to change an office building into a restaurant, to where you just say, forget it, let's just build our own building?
At this point, depending on what I would do, it just depends. Like, if I found a really cool building that I thought looked like it needed to be something, then you make it what it needs to be.
Yeah.
But if I was going to move, say, Butler Penne, I would probably look to move it to like a strip mall or a small standalone building in a shopping center, just because I think that concept is probably well suited for that.
Mm-hmm.
But to take the chop shop and try and open it again, I don't think that you could do it in a building that you just built yourself, because a lot of the character of that place comes from the building.
Sure.
I've had people ask me about that before, and I said, if I went to a design professional and a contractor and just explained to them how the chop shop looked, they would basically build me Quaker steak and lube, right?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But they don't have the same character and the same vibe when you walk in. I'd get all the reproduction signs that were easy to find.
That's right.
Everything in the shop kind of tells a story of where it came from, whether I found it somewhere, whether I've had somebody that's been coming in there for years that uncovered something in a barn that was like, hey, I know where this belongs. And then they come in the next time they eat and they say, I found this. Can you use it for anything? And then it turns into a light fixture.
Right. Well, I mean, just from being in the shop, like you guys have done a great job of mixing like Americana with music with your signage. Mm-hmm. It does have this seamless feel to it, where you don't step in and you're like, well, this doesn't make sense. But like, it's a bunch of different things, but it makes sense.
It does, and that was all by accident. It was just all by accident. They were all things I was interested in, and to me they made sense, but I didn't ever think about it from somebody else's point of view coming in. Would it make sense to them? I do now. Like, I'm conscious of that after talking with people, and that your concept really does need to make sense on all of those different levels, and be kind of consistent through it. You're not gonna open a brewery and serve, Asian fusion food and listen to classical music, right?
Right.
That wouldn't make sense. It would be very, very confusing to somebody to come in and be like, where am I?
Mm-hmm.
But I did not realize any of that when put the shop together.
Got lucky.
Yeah, I did.
That works. Do you, we talked a little bit about vision, and just from talking to you, like I said, I believe that you certainly have a visionary aspect to you. Chop shop in 10 years. What would be your goal? What would you love for it to look like? Are there two? I mean, I don't know. Like, have you thought down the road at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot. You ask Lindsay, she'll tell you that it's probably one of my best qualities, one of my worst qualities all at once. Because I just have a hard time not thinking and shutting it off. So, yeah, I thought about it a lot. Like, eventually, I'd love to have a liquor license at the shop, and be able to have a full blown restaurant with a solid food and beverage program. If I was going to open another chop shop, I've thought about it a lot. Ideally, I'd like to be near a college campus. IUP would be an ideal spot, I feel, for it. Armstrong County licenses are a lot more cost effective than Butler County licenses. You have the same demographic coming in year after year after year, so you don't really have to worry about your demographic aging out.
Sure.
Stuff like that. There's a spot in Zilly I like that I'd think about moving it there too. But again, it would, at that point, a license is probably out of the question because that's still Butler County and they're really expensive. But I've thought about it. It's just, again, it's what do you focus on? Because there are potential possibilities with that. There's some potential possibilities with Penne. I'm still handling the kitchen at Brewworks, so I'm still training people and writing menus and stuff over there too. So it's if I'm going to do something else with the shop and open up a second location, like most of my focus for at least a solid year to 2 years is going to be that location. Right. So now, then you got to think about, is this one going to survive if I'm kind of neglecting it for that period of time? Do I have a strong enough person?
You have families to feed, not just your own, but you got a bunch more.
Right. So will this location survive if I step away from it? Do I have a strong enough person there that can handle it? How about here? And for the most part, I think I probably do, because I'm really fortunate to have a great staff pretty much every location.
You guys seem to be a great community. Like, you guys seem pretty strong just from a customer's standpoint. I mean,
it's unique for sure. And you don't, unless you've been in the restaurant business a long time, you don't realize that maybe there's those differences. I mean, Chop Shop crew and Penne, they all come from the Chop Shop. Everybody that's in Penne, everybody that's in Brewworks, all started at Chop Shop. So it definitely is a very family atmosphere there. Where they're like your brothers, your sisters. You watch out for them.
That's cool.
This Zach worked with me a long time. I got a lot of stories about Zach, but so this is one I tell the staff a lot. Like, whenever we have a lot of new people in, like, I'm gonna push people, and I'm gonna try to push you and get the best out of you that I can get, and you're gonna hate me sometimes for it. But at the end of the day, when you need a person, I'm gonna be there.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you need. You're moving, great. Let me go get the truck. I'll be there. I'll stay there for the whole weekend and help you pack up and move. That's just what we do. But Zach, before he lived in town and he would ride his bike to work every day. So one day his bike got stolen. Came to work. He was pretty upset about it. His buddies had made it for him. They built him this bike out of spare parts and painted it for him and everything. And it was a nice bike. So he called me. He's like, I'm going to be late. I got to walk. Somebody stole my bike. All right. Week goes by. We have a staff meeting. He gets a phone call right before the staff meeting. One of his buddies just saw somebody riding his bike down Broad Street.
Yeah.
He hangs up the phone. He just looks at me. He says, I got to go get my bike, and runs out. Just runs out the back door. I'm like, so the staff meeting hadn't started yet, but all the kitchen crew were there.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, I had this big white box truck that we would use for caterings. And I'm like, where's Zach going? He's gonna go get his bike. He's probably gonna get in a fight somewhere. Like, he doesn't know what he's gonna be walking into. All somebody said is, I saw somebody with your bike on Broad Street.
Right.
I said, come on. So everybody jumps in the back of the box truck. I'm driving all around Broad Street, area, trying to find Zach. We come down, we were coming down, would have been Penne.
Yeah.
And we get to the Broad Street intersection. I look down. He's right there by Broad Street Elementary. And there's a whole group of people all standing around him. And he's standing there with his hand on his bike. I'm like, all right. So we turn the box truck in, pull off to the side right by everybody. They turn around, hopped out, flip open the garage door on the box truck. Like six of us jump out, and they're looking at us. And I said, why do you have his bike? And then all of a sudden the story changed, and that kid was like, I'm sorry. I found it.
Right.
I found it. But up until that point, he was yelling back that was his bike, and now all these other people were out there. It was going to be a confrontation. But
don't mess with the chop
that's
shop
what
crew,
I said.
man.
I was like, you need me to get into a gang fight for you? I will be there.
That's awesome.
But that's kind of, it's a fun story, but it really does kind of sum up
Sure.
how everybody at the shop is with each other.
That translates into who you guys are.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Man.
Yeah, and that's why
that's cool.
One of the reasons why we're able to really retain the good crew that we do have. They stay for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because you treat them well, and you train them well enough that they could go get a job somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But you treat them well enough that they don't want to.
Yeah. So I mean, even talking about how so many businesses move forward after the past 6 months. Again, we're talking about kind of vision even down the road. Has the last 6 months changed the way that you, as a restaurant owner, do your thing, or are there going to be changes that are made for the foreseeable future that you feel like you've learned over the last 6 months?
Yeah, that's definitely, everything's still constantly changing. So It's just, you're back into that adapt and survive mentality. Whatever happens this week, whatever happens this month, figure out a way to get around it, overcome it, and keep going. We have been very, very fortunate, again, that Butler is so supportive and have really identified with the shop. And I feel like our guests are really pretty loyal. And they almost have that same feeling that the shop is part of their, it's theirs too. Like they've supported it for years, and it's uniquely Butler to them. So they don't want to see anything happen to it.
Yeah.
And that has become very evident with coronavirus. I was pretty sure that once we were down to takeout only from March, April, May,
mm-hmm.
that we might not be surviving too, looking at it at the beginning. So we adjusted hours, we adjusted staffing, again, like that's where my staff is awesome, because I offered them, whoever wanted a voluntary layoff, to just take it and file for their own employment.
Right.
Every single one said, we'll work whatever hours we can have.
Wow.
And nobody left, nobody quit. We all just did what we had to do to get through it. As soon as we were able to have people back in the restaurant, even our to-go business was extremely busy for the hours that we were open. We just focused the hours to the normal busy times. But once we were able to have people back in the seats, I was worried that our to-go business would start to go down, because people who were worried about still coming out
mm-hmm.
wouldn't want to walk through a restaurant, even if it was 25% full, to get their to-goes. But I've been really surprised that they have. People are feeling safe enough to come into the shop with the way that we keep everything clean.
Mm-hmm.
That, we've always sanitized every surface after people touch them.
Mm-hmm.
So people who were comfortable coming out are coming out, and they're actually thinking ahead, knowing that we're at 25% capacity. So the peak times, they might be waiting for a table. So now we see people coming in earlier and we see people coming in later. Yeah. So it's really kind of evened out our day. And then we've still been doing as much on the to-go side of things. So
that's great.
Yeah, it means that no matter what your opinion of coronavirus and the situation is, bottom line is people have felt safe coming to the shop either way. And that is not something that I could have anticipated, but I'm very, very thankful that this happened.
Well, dude, it's kind of ironic. I think a couple buddies and I might actually be going to the shop for lunch today. But I think, as we kind of end here, I think you're totally right in that people feel comfortable coming to your place. Dude, it truly is just a great part of Butler from a customer's perspective. And I totally agree. Like, people that come there regularly feel like, man, this is a part of my life, is coming to your place. So you guys have just done an awesome job, I think, from how it looks, but even to how it's run. Like, the staff there is just top notch. So I'm just certainly thankful for you and for your vision for what the shop and what your businesses have brought to this town. I think are great, man, and they definitely give life to the city of Butler. And I think that Butler thanks you for it, for sure, because it is just a great part of this town.
Like I said, I'm thankful that everybody's been supportive of it, because it's a big, scary risk to take. And, you just, at the end of the day, you hope people identify with it, they support it, and that you can make the community a better place through it.
Sure. That's awesome. Well, hey, shout out, where can people find you? Instagram, social medias, or even you can give the address if you'd like as well.
I honestly don't know if I know all of them that accurate. Chop Shop, Penne, and the Kitchen at Butler Brew Works are all on Instagram. The Brew Works, Penne, and the Chop Shop are all on Facebook.
Okay.
But I don't have a separate page for just the food at the Butler Brew Works on Facebook currently. And I actually think that's about it. I believe I did have a YouTube channel started for the shop, but never posted anything on it.
Okay.
But maybe in the future.
For sure. That's awesome. Social media, check them out. You will not regret going to get some of this man's food.
So
thanks so much, Bill. I really appreciate it. Thank you.